I knew I did not want to stay in Mount Vernon where I was brought up. I knew I didn't want to stay in suburbia. I hated suburbia and I hated the life that suburbia suggested. And I was very convinced that I wanted to live the urban life. And I was not into getting married, which a lot of my friends from Mount Vernon got married early. And I created a problem with, I met a guy who I fell in love with, Arthur, and he always wanted to get married. I wasn't interested. I sort of knew I was going to be in the entertainment world because I started in the entertainment world from high school. I went to performing arts as a dancer, and soon after I started, and I knew I wasn't going to be a professional dancer, so I went to college and I studied political philosophy. But I didn't know where. I just knew I wanted to be in the entertainment business. And the first job I got was as a cub writer and an assistant to the head of Ford at J. Walter Thompson. And they worked your little tail off. So I hated the secretarial part, but I was learning a lot because I had to write a television ad, I had to write a radio commercial, I had to write a television commercial. Each month, you had to create a whole new, um, what's it called, concept for what you were writing. And I hated it because I was writing Pretend Tea, Fleischmann's Yeast, and what else? And Fleischmann's Yeast, and Scotty's toilet paper. And I thought I didn't go to political philosophies to write about toilet paper. So I soon got a job. I saw an ad for a job at ABC with a new documentary unit. And I interviewed there as a Gal Friday. And in 3 days, they said to me, "You are not a secretary, go start being a researcher." And I was the best job learning about research as the basis for everything. Good research, responsible research, should be like 10 news a day and 14 magazines or something. And it was quite fabulous because I really understood why that was the big step in learning how to really do responsible work, back it up with knowledge, commit myself to really learning the depth of a subject, so I felt confident about it. And I always knew what I was talking about. I never fudged anything. I didn't need to fudge anything. I probably spent too much time learning. And it was the era of very few women being in the news business. And I was at ABC, and there were myself and one other woman in the documentary world. And it was very unique. I mean, there were very few women producers at that time. So you really had to show your worth in order to move up. And slowly I moved up. I became an associate producer. I became a production assistant, and I started traveling throughout the world, which was wonderful because we were doing cultural and historical programming. So they sent me every place, all over Europe, and I was the advanced person. I was alone. I had to go to the museums, find the information, set up the shoot, and then when the crew came, I worked with the crew. So it was an incredible experience in learning how to be independent on your own in a very strange environment. The only thing that was wonderful about it is because we were with ABC, whenever I went any place, they always paid attention because I was with the big network at that time. I think the lessons I learned at that stage were you stick with what you really believe in. And I knew that I wanted to be in fact-based television, which was documentaries. And I knew that if I worked hard enough and I learned enough, and I'm a quick learn, that I would feel okay. Even when I was scared to death, when they sent me to Europe the first time, I was scared to death. But I was pursuing information. You learn. And it was also that period when the women's movement was beginning to really have a voice. And I was very active in the women's movement. And it gave me an opportunity to be around other women who thought like me. And it sort of was a wonderful support system to be in a population of people who thought like you. And in the back of my life, I had Arthur. We were going together and going together, going together. And he wanted to get married, and I wasn't ready to get married. I was ready to travel the world. So marriage was not a thing for me. But eventually, he said, enough's enough. But that was 7 years down the line. And I worked and I advanced, and I was with a wonderful boss who really liked me and sort of depended on me. Well, not. I tell you, it was interesting in New York because I was growing up, so to speak. I was going step by step up the ladder, and the news business. I achieved, associate producer. I wanted to start producing, which I just began to start producing. And Arthur and I had gotten married, and he had been sent out to California for his work. They offered him a wonderful job out here, and I thought California was the pit hole of the world. I was terrified to be out in California. First of all, I thought it was anti-intellectual. I didn't think I thought it was all about Hollywood. I was about news. Hollywood and news were two different worlds, and I was scared. I was really scared. But eventually, after 2 years of being in two different coasts, it became very difficult. So I tried to come out to California, which I did. And it was scary. It was a very frightening experience because sexism prevailed in Hollywood in a way I never knew it. I didn't understand it. In New York, it was sort of more undercover. And I was rising, I was going up the ladder, so I had achieved good positions. So the sexism was something to break the back of. I thought, I was confident enough to break the back. When I got out to California, it was different language. I didn't understand the language. It was fierce. It was ageist. It was sexist. And I just hadn't ever been exposed to those values. I was exposed to values. If you work hard, you succeed. It wasn't about working hard and succeeding as much. So I didn't get a job right away. It took me about 4 months to get a job. And when you're in a new place, you don't know how to get around, and you don't have a job. You don't belong anyplace. You're sort of out on a ledge. I gotten a job, and it was as an associate producer to be locked up with Truman Capote in a hotel to transmit to him all the research information that I had gathered on crime. And he was a genius on crime, so he absorbed the material. But we prepared him to be the host for a series on crime, and I was the intermediary who had to prep him, get him going, and all he wanted to do was gossip. But it was a very, very exciting experience. He was a brilliant man to spend time with. Anyway, that one job led to another, and then I got enamored with commercial television. And that was really where you could face sexism in a very different way then. But I began to develop with partners dramatic stories. And after a long time, I opened an office. I had an office for about a year and a half before anything happened, which I paid for. And the one mistake, I made a big mistake there. I wanted to be on my own. So I opened Margot Winchester Productions. What I should have done was take the job and learn the way of commercial television from the inside. But I was learning it from the outside, which was much harder. So that's a life lesson, that if you're going to play with the big guys, you better learn how the game is played. And I had no idea the game was played. I sort of did it. I developed a movie that they partnered us with a man at that time whom I knew socially, and my partner and I were partnered with them. And he hired a new president, a woman, who wanted to just eliminate us. But we held on with the skin of our teeth, and it became a very, very, very successful movie. It had Keanu Reeves, Kiefer Sutherland, what's his name, the guy from Titanic, not Leonardo, the other one, Billy Zane. Laura Laughlin. It was a fabulous, and it turned out that it's been running for all these years. It's been running for about 25 years, making money. So I finally made money, surprisingly, on television, movies for television. You usually make just a fee. You don't get, back end money, but I made back end money, which was wonderful. And I sold another film based on a true story of friends of mine in New York. It was still the commercial television was very fierce, very tough, and much scarier than what I found the world of documentaries. But at least I got a foothold in it by making those. And then I, I was hired in 1991 as head of development for an international company at ABC again. And it was a wonderful experience for 5 years because we were partnered with a German company, a French company, a Spanish company, and the American company. And we had to develop material. I had to develop material that satisfied all the needs of these four companies. Where egos ran rampant. So that was not an easy, and also it was part of ABC where Arthur used to work there. So they were not used to a woman who had, you know, um, control of any sort. And I was Arthur's wife, so they were very confused about me. But it was a very male driven environment there. And the guy who I worked with was very male driven, but he was very chauvinistic. But for 5 years that we worked, I just beat him up. He finally learned what chauvinism is and to drop it. So it was a hard experience, but we became very, very, very good friends, which we're very good friends to this day. The inside to learn how it works instead of breaking the mold from the outside. It's very, very hard as a woman during those years. And when I went to work for ABC 91 to 95, that international company, it taught me that what you learn from the inside you can't as easily learn from the outside because it's the way the corporations work. And ultimately, you're selling to the corporations. So even though I had the entrepreneurial spirit and wanted to do it my way from outside, I should have gone in and done a stint inside. So I would have learned more of how people function on the inside instead of trying to assume how they did it from the outside. And I think the major lesson that I learned was still pursue what you love because you learn. You keep on learning.